The snow scratched at his skin as Miguel Arantes stopped beside the lamppost, strung with red bows. The mother, Lina, held her twins close, knees pressed to the frozen ground. He knelt and offered a wrapped box, its red ribbon trembling. On the card tied to the bow sat a familiar seal, the foundation that funded the shelters, his foundation. "We tried the shelter. They said no." Lina's voice rose in vapor. The church bells marked the hour. Miguel discreetly turned the card. An emergency release code was printed there. If that code had been issued, why on Christmas Eve had a door stayed shut to 2 children? The snow came sideways, needling the skin, a bright static that made streetlights bloom into soft halos. Miguel Arantes stepped out of the car and let the city's Christmas Eve wash over him. Distant bells, the hiss of tires over ice, the faint chime of a wind-tossed decoration. He drew his scarf higher and saw them. Lina holding her twins tight beneath the red-bowed lamppost, their silhouettes tucked into each other like parentheses against the cold. The twins' boots barely scratched the ground. They were perched on their mother's shins to keep their socks out of the slush. The red ribbon on the gift box in Miguel's hands jittered in the wind. He knelt so his breath met theirs in a little clouded tent. "Take this," he said, voice low to keep it from sounding like an announcement. The box, still sealed, was small enough to be humble and heavy enough to matter. The red ribbon carried a simple card, his foundation's crest, embossed but quiet, the sort of mark designed to reassure, not impress. Lina's eyes widened with the shock of immediate relief and the embarrassment of needing it. The twins angled closer, as if warmth could be borrowed by leaning. One had a small nick on her lower lip, the kind children acquire from curiosity and winter air. "We went to the shelter," Lina said, each word appearing as a cloud. "They said no." The bells of the church at the corner marked the hour. Miguel glanced at the card, letting the world narrow to the paper's weight against his glove. There, a line of numbers, an emergency authorization code his team used when nights turned dangerous and the city's margins thinned. The code had been issued. That meant the money had moved. That meant a door somewhere should have opened. Wind shoved a coil of tinsel down the block. Behind them, a cafe's windows were fogged with conversation and cinnamon. The angle of the twins' shoulders told him everything, the way kids try to take up less space when the world has told them they are too much. "Let's get you warm," he said, standing. He made sure to hand the box to Lina, not to the girls, so the gift sat with the adults' dignity. "There's a warming center 2 blocks down. I'll walk you." He set his pace to theirs, step for step, keeping a half-meter off to let Lina lead. The twins, Bia and Leah, matched each other's strides with soldierly seriousness. The red ribbon thumped softly against the box with each step, a tiny drum in the corridor of wind. Miguel called ahead to the cafe, paid for 3 hot chocolates without entering, and waited curbside for the paper cups to appear. He passed them to Lina first, so her hands would warm through her gloves, then crouched and asked, "Which of you wants extra marshmallows?" The girls raised their hands in unison, a silent joke between them. The joke landed. Their shoulders rose with a small laugh. Warmth, then dignity, then plan. That was the order. They reached the warming center's door, where the entrance light was a humming coin above a steel handle. The twins tilted their heads to read a taped sign. "Open," Miguel said and pushed. Inside, the air smelled like radiator heat and shampoo, the particular mix of temporary safety. A volunteer glanced up from a clipboard, smile ready in the way of people who choose to be here. Then her eyes landed on Lina's box, the red ribbon, the card. "We tried earlier," Lina told her, voice steady now. "They said we couldn't stay." The volunteer's smile faltered. Her mouth made a small O she tried to hide. "We've been at capacity," she said carefully. "Let me check again." Miguel didn't move further in. He wanted Lina to be the lead in her own scene. Kids were excellent sensors. They could smell when adults turned their lives into a performance. The twins stood with cups steaming and studied the bulletin board with candy cane borders. Miguel watched the volunteer make a call, her tone shifting from cheerful to procedural, then to a slow, pinched confusion. The red ribbon shivered, catching the air each time the door thudded open with new arrivals. His phone buzzed against his coat. He ignored it once, then again. He stepped aside, answered. Arantes. In his ear, a clipped voice he knew from project briefings. The program coordinator for shelter partnerships, efficient to a fault, the sort who labeled his labels. I saw the emergency code hit our system this afternoon, Miguel said, eyes on the twins' boots. We're standing at a partner site. They were turned away. A pause. Paper rustled. The coordinator's tone became a metronome. There's a temporary suspension in our disbursements. Standard audit at quarter end. Funds are frozen until we clear signatures. Miguel felt the temperature drop in a room heated to a steady hum. Quarter end, Christmas Eve. The coldest night of the year, and the money was sitting obediently in an accounting queue. He pictured his daughter asleep at home. A crayon portrait of their dog taped to her wall, the space heater angled just so. He looked at the twins' chapped cheeks and felt the same protective heat move under his ribs. Who authorized the suspension? He asked, voice as neutral as fresh snow. It came through the director's office, the coordinator said, and a vendor flagged an anomaly. Routine, really. We're just being cautious. Cautious. Miguel's gaze drifted to the card on Lena's ribbon, the embossed crest pressed into the fibers like a promise. He walked back to the desk, placing his badge on the counter, not to pull rank, but to drop pretense. I can authorize immediate release for families with children, he told the volunteer gently. You can admit them now. The volunteer's shoulders eased. She nodded, eyes grateful, and signaled to the staffer at the intake computer. The twins shifted, relief making them taller. Lena's hand trembled as she clutched the box, not out of fear now, but from the sudden permission to stand fully. The intake staffer typed, looked up, typed again. Her brow folded. This family was entered at 6 p.m., she said quietly. Status denied due to capacity. But the override code it's on file. Miguel's jaw went still. The override code had been present at 6. The denial had still been logged. He pictured a door, a hand, a decision made in a moment when the wind was a blade. He could follow the paper trail later, right now, action. Admit them, he said, keeping his tone level enough for health and warm enough for children. I'll handle the fallout. They stepped through a thin curtain into a room with cots arranged in careful rows, a geography of temporary, and the twins' eyes moved everywhere at once. Blankets folded at the cot ends, a basket of books, a paper star glued to a window. He let Lena choose a corner. She set the sealed box at the foot of the cot and sat, palms pressed to her knees as if bracing against something that had already passed. Miguel gave her space. Dignity first. His phone vibrated again. He stepped into the hallway, away from the paper stars. The number belonged to his operations lead, Juno, the person he trusted with the unglamorous scaffolding that kept promises standing. Juno, he said, we've got a suspension on emergency disbursements flagged as an audit on Christmas Eve. I want names, emails, and timestamps. Pull the last 48 hours and check vendor tickets that mention anomaly. You're at a site? Juno asked, already typing by the sound of it. Yes, Lena and her daughters are in, but they were denied earlier, despite an override code. Find me who touched the switch. In the hallway, a string of fairy lights winked above an exit sign. The city's cold pressed against the doors, a patient animal testing the seams. He listened to the keyboard on the other end, a quick percussion. I'm seeing a hold initiated by Director Augusto Sales, Juno said, co-signed by a third-party auditor, Vela Consulting. The hold is tagged as routine, but the timing is odd. Odd was the polite skin over what he felt. He breathed slowly, the way his trainer had taught him for tough negotiations. Air in, count, air out. Escalate. We'll need compliance, but first, a field check. I want to know if other families were turned away tonight. He pocketed the phone and returned to the room. The twins had removed their boots and were inspecting the paper star, each girl holding an end of the window's hum. Little scientists of light. Lena looked up as he approached, gratitude and a question both standing in her eyes. He nodded, conveying that a thing that was wrong had begun to be named. "You'll be safe here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we'll make sure the rest follows." A volunteer offered the twins a book about a snow fox that outsmarts the wind. The girls settled, shoulders loosening, the cots creaking with the sound of new stability. The red ribbon on the box lay still at last, its bow like a small heart pinned to a promise. Miguel stepped back into the cold. The bells from the church carried across the street like clear glass. He took a final look at the lobby's sign-in, so many names pressed into ink, each one a weather report. Snow caught in the seams of his shoes. As he reached for his phone to call the director, the door behind him opened a crack. The intake staffer's voice reached him, hushed. "Sir, one more thing. When they came at 6, someone wrote a note on the denial. I didn't notice until now." She held out a slip torn from the bottom of a form. On it, a quick scrawl in a pen that bled on cheap paper. "Hold until V confirms." No signature, just an initial curling like smoke. "V," Miguel repeated, the letter fogging in his breath. Velar? Vendor? Or a name he knew far too well. He closed his fingers around the note, the ink already smudging under the faint wet of snow. Somewhere between his office and this door, someone had decided that the edge of winter would become a test. For Lena and 2 children, it had been a verdict. He dialed. The phone rang. The line clicked. "Director Salles," a voice answered, smooth as a well-polished banister. "Director," Miguel said, looking back through the glass at the twins, the red ribbon, the paper star, "we need to talk about a decision made at 6 p.m. The director's reply was a practiced warmth. "Of course. About what specifically?" Miguel let the note's corner bite into his palm, a small, useful pain. "About this. Why did an override code get ignored tonight?" Silence. "Then, who gave you that note?" And suddenly the question snapped into place like ice. If the director already knew the note existed, what else did he know about how Christmas Eve had been engineered? The wind shouldered the door, impatient. The bells began again. Miguel steadied his voice. "The better question is who ordered the hold, and why?" The line thinned, a wire pulled taut across the night. Then a laugh, not amused, but buying time. "Careful, Miguel. Audits have rules." He glanced at the red-bowed box through the glass, at 2 small faces fading into sleep. Rules had also had a night like this to learn mercy. He slipped the note into his pocket, spine straightening against the cold. "So do I," he said, "and I'm making a new one." The director inhaled an audible hinge. "Which is?" Miguel stepped off the stoop into the snow, phone at his ear, and aimed himself toward the truth, like a man stepping into a bright corridor. No child left out in the cold. The call stayed open, a lit fuse in the dark, and then the director said something that made Miguel stop mid-step, the city suddenly very quiet around him. "Before you grandstand," the director murmured, "you should ask why that override code was printed on your personal crest by someone who doesn't work for you anymore." The snow seemed to pause, listening. A who, not a what. A name he hadn't heard in months. The letter V. Who exactly had stamped that emergency code? And why had they wanted Lena and the twins held until they could confirm? If the override came from inside his own house, whose hand had moved it, and what would he find when he pulled on the initial V? Snow settled on the city like breath held too long. Miguel ducked into the awning of a closed florist's shop across from the warming center and brought the card up under the streetlight. The seal looked right, the same matte emboss he'd approved months ago, but the paper felt off. His cards had a faint linen tooth. This one was smoother, like someone had paid for the sheen and skimped on the integrity. The red ribbon, wet with melted flakes, stuck a little to his glove. Beneath the crest, the emergency code ran in tidy digits. It should have been an open door in numbers. He took a photo and sent it to Juno with a single line. "Compare to our last batch." Then he waited, watching the warming center's windows fog and clear with the rhythm of warm bodies breathing. A bus hissed to a stop at the corner, exhaling passengers who hurried with collars high. The city was either in a hurry or pretending not to be. It was always one of the two. Juno replied fast. "Texture mismatch. Ours are 80 lb linen. That looks like 100 lb gloss cover. Also, QR density is off. Not ours." Not ours. The seal was theirs, the code was theirs, but the body was not. Miguel held the card a little farther from his face, as if distance would reveal an art forgery's brush strokes. He angled it toward the streetlight. There, at the very bottom margin, tiny and nearly swallowed by the border, a print vendor's mark. Velar Pren 1224. The letter V sitting there like an initial at the end of a secret letter. He called Juno. "We don't print through Velar," he said. "We used them 2 years ago. You cut them," Juno said. "Quality issues and late deliveries." "I remember the meeting. You said, if we're shipping dignity, we can't do it on a discount." Heat rose in his chest at the memory, part pride, part anger that the past had come back in such a cheap disguise. "Then why does this card carry our crest and their mark?" "Because someone ordered a run with our art files," Juno said, fingers clicking in the background, "and because someone gave them access." He pictured the director's smooth voice on the line, the practiced warmth. He pictured Lena's hands around the sealed, red-bowed box. Every decision had a body attached to it. He'd learned that too late once, and swore never to forget. He crossed the street and re-entered the lobby, keeping his voice low so the room's calm would hold. Lena looked up from the cot, the twins asleep in symmetries that only children found. "Everything okay?" she whispered. "Yes," he said. "I might need to look at that card again later, but you keep the box. It's yours." He held her gaze just long enough to make the sentence land like a certainty, not a courtesy. Then he turned back to the desk. "Who was on intake at 6? He asked the staffer gently. The young woman glanced at a schedule. "Marcos. He's off now. We swap every 4 hours. "Was there a note?" he asked, though the slip in his pocket answered for him. She nodded, remorse in the movement. "We get told to follow the dashboard. It was red. Red means do not admit." Miguel thought of the QR density, the wrong paper, the right seal, the director's audit. Red across the screen, red on the ribbon. Color could be a warning or a celebration depending on who clicked first. "Thank you," he said, and meant it. She looked relieved to be thanked for something in a night that had asked her to ignore and override. Back on the sidewalk, he called the shelter coordinator. "I need red-only access to the vendor portal," he said. "Velar Consulting, also their print subsidiary if they have one. We don't usually." "You do now." He kept his tone even and left the silence there to be filled with action. Snow built up on his shoulders like slow epaulets. Minutes later, a link arrived. He thumbed it open, stepping under the florist's awning again to shield the screen. The vendor portal was exactly what he expected. Ugly, functional, confident enough to be unhelpful. He filtered by the date. A list populated with entries in grey stripes. Velar Consulting had opened a ticket flagged anomaly at 3:12 p.m., attaching 3 images of questionable expense timing. The ticket had been marked urgent, and assigned to Director Sales for review. He clicked the images, screenshots of internal transfers that were, in fact, routine at quarter end to top up the emergency fund. It was a pattern as old as the program itself. Velar had framed it like a red flag. He went further back. At 2:51 p.m., the print subsidiary, Vela Print Solutions, logged a completed job. Foundation emergency cards, 250 units. Attached was a proof of his foundation's crest, his emergency code layout, his signature line template. The proof approval field was filled in with a scrawl captured by a camera. V, approved. Approved by V. At 2:51 p.m. on Christmas Eve, a vendor had printed counterfeit cards with his crest and used them to ride the rails of his process. At 3:12 p.m., the consultancy arm flagged a made-up anomaly. At 6 p.m., a family with a valid override had been told no. The sequence was too neat. Neat sequences were man-made. Miguel called the director again, straight to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. Paper trails told better stories than voicemails that could be forwarded without context. He dialed Juno. "We need audit logs for who accessed the crest files," he said, "and I want building camera pulls for today." Velar printed 250 emergency cards with our art at 2:51. Someone approved with a single initial V. "On it," Juno said. "Also, our legitimate batch was delivered last week. Linen stock, count matched, nothing missing." "So these weren't replacing ours. They were duplicating ours," Miguel said. 2 sets of keys for 1 door. He checked the time and did the math that had become muscle memory whenever money and people met. If Velar flagged false anomalies, he said, thinking aloud, they needed the disbursement freeze to stick. That means someone inside had to choose hold instead of review without hold, and that someone needed plausible deniability. "Director Sales," Juno said, not as an accusation, but as a list item. "But he wouldn't risk it unless someone else promised cover," Miguel finished. His breath fogged. The florist's awning dripped a patient rhythm onto the sidewalk. He imagined 2 offices, 2 sets of motives braided for a night like this, when people were less likely to look closely because they were home or trying to get there. A group of carolers moved past, their harmonies catching on the cold and blooming for a moment, then thinning. He watched them cross the intersection and vanish into the small gold of a lit doorway. In the warming center, a volunteer taped another paper star to the window, a crooked constellation growing 1 piece at a time. Miguel opened his email and composed a clean, unadorned note to compliance. Immediate review, potential vendor collusion and internal override suppression, attachments forthcoming. He CC'd legal, then hesitated, moved legal to BCC. He needed eyes without alarms for the next 10 minutes. Then he forwarded the vendor proof to his personal inbox and saved the images locally. A shadow moved in the glass of the florist's door. He turned. A man in a heavy parka stood just inside the shop, flipping the closed sign to peer out. The man caught Miguel's eye, then looked away too fast. Odd, on a night like this, to be open in secret. The man fiddled with a stack of ribbons, red ones, through the glass. Miguel tapped the door with 2 knuckles. The man swallowed and shook his head, closed. A crack of his face in the light. The shape of guilt is always the same. Chin down, eyes up, exit nearby. Miguel made a note to circle back. For now, he returned to the problem he could press. He sent the vendor proof to the director with a single question. Why is Velar printing our emergency cards? Then he typed one to Velar's general inbox. Cease use of our art immediately. Confirm chain of approvals for job Velar print 1224. 10 minutes. He added his title in the signature, not as threat, but as a reminder. Titles were tools. Use, don't worship. His phone rang before he could pocket it. An unknown number. He answered. Arantes, a voice without weather. You're moving quickly. Identify yourself, Miguel said. Silence, and then a soft chuckle. You already did. You tagged me with a single letter. A beat. Let's not be dramatic. The cards are for continuity. If the real ones were delayed, the city still needed a way to root families. We stepped in. The real ones weren't delayed, Miguel said, and your consultancy froze the funds. We recommended prudence, the voice said mildly. Director Salles agreed. He is, after all, responsible for proper controls. The florist's window reflected Miguel's face back at him, a double exposure of tired and resolved. You printed our crest and our codes without permission, he said. You turned an override into a dead end. Tonight, a mother and 2 children paid for your prudence with their breath. Let's not sentimentalize logistics, the voice said. You know this city. Sometimes you have to create choke points to see who pushes. It's instructive. The word instructive lit a fuse behind his ribs. The twins' small boots, the sealed red-bowed box. He kept his tone level. We'll be terminating all contracts with Valar effective immediately, he said, and we'll be forwarding this to the authorities. Careful, the voice said, warm now, almost paternal. You'll want to look at your own house first. Who gave us the files, Miguel? Who signed those proofs? We didn't break in. We were invited. The florist's interior went dark again. The man inside moved away from the window. Snow spooled down in slower flakes. Across the street, the paper stars held their shape. Send me the name, Miguel said. A click of tongue. Better if you find it yourself. The letter you're chasing hides in your emails every day, sleeps in your subject lines, smiles in your meetings. The voice softened further. Merry Christmas, Miguel. Take care not to confuse a headwind with a conspiracy. It makes good men theatrical. The line went dead. He stared at his phone until the screen dimmed. Wind rose enough to lift the red ribbon's tail where it lay on the cot inside, a tiny wave from across the glass. He breathed once, twice, steadying. The letter V wasn't just a vendor's vanity. It was a symbology, an inside joke, someone close. He opened his email and searched for V in signatures. The results, at first glance, were a crowd. Vendors, volunteers, names with vowels that turned to V's in shorthand. He filtered further, internal only. The list thinned. One stood out like a dropped stitch in a sweater he'd worn every day. A series of brief approvals from a senior operations director who preferred initials in place of names. The last email, time-stamped 2:47 p.m., read, Approve print as backup. V. He looked up at the warming center door, at the place where the night folded around those inside. Snow whispered at his cuffs, an insistent reminder. The initial wasn't a stranger's flourish, it belonged to someone on his own leadership team. When he confronted the V in the building logs, what would break first? The cover story or the alliance with Director Salles? The night had the texture of unspun glass, brittle, gleaming, ready to cut. Miguel left the warming center and angled toward his car, Boots writing short, efficient sentences in the snow. The city had moved from festive to skeletal, Christmas lights reduced to pure function in the cold. He keyed the ignition, watched his breath fog the windshield, and called the partnership manager whose number he knew too well from calm months and crisis quarters. Rafa, he said when the line clicked, tell me why the disbursement dashboard is red on Christmas Eve. And on the speaker, Raphael cleared his throat, office noise ghosting behind him. Printers, a kettle, someone laughing too loudly at the wrong time. We've got an audit hold, he said, each word carrying quotation marks. Director Salles pushed it through. Routine quarter end. Compliance wants to ensure all emergency top-ups match incoming donations. Miguel checked the time. 9:18 p.m. Quarter end was 3 days away. Quarter end is the 31st, he said, voice steady. And emergency funds exist to be used in emergencies. You know the temperature tonight. Rafa exhaled, a shiver through the line. I know. We argued. He said we had anomalies flagged by Velar and that it was prudent to freeze new disbursements until review. The name slid into the car like a draft under a door. Velar flagged anomalies after printing backup cards with our crest, Miguel said. They created the choke point. We drove into it. Silence. Then a low, careful, "You want me to lift the hold from our side?" Miguel stared past the blur of the windshield at the warm rectangle of the warming center window. "You don't have permissions," he said. "Only Sales and one other on ops can hard freeze. Tell me who." Rafa hesitated. Systems and loyalties both had logs. "Senior Ops Director, the one who signs with initials," he said finally. "They asked for elevated access last quarter to reduce bottlenecks. It was approved." He rubbed his forehead, thumb finding the notch that formed under stress, the fossil of previous winters. "I'll handle the unfreeze. Meanwhile, I need field data. How many sites called capacity tonight? How many families denied with override codes on file? Give me 30 minutes. 15, Miguel said. Text me the count and the addresses. He hung up and gunned the car into motion, tires biting and catching. Downtown fell away to the district where the city systems lived, in forgettable buildings, servers, fiber, heat. He turned into the garage beneath his office. The ramp groaned. A security camera blinked a red eye at him, bored and omniscient. Upstairs, the office was an aquarium of blue light, heating set to weekend low, plants stoic on their window ledges, the holiday candy bowl on reception, a displaced island. He walked straight to Ops. Juno had beaten him there. Her coat was thrown over the back of a chair, laptop open into the pale dawn of spreadsheet cells. "I pulled the access logs," she said without preamble, spinning the screen toward him. "Director Sales initiated the hold at 3:21 p.m. The Senior Ops Director, our V, co-signed at 3:24. 5 minutes later, a script ran that pushed all open disbursement requests into pending audit status. It flipped the dashboard to red. Miguel scanned the columns. The script name wore the bland uniform of corporate mischief, Auto Q4 Review PS1. Who wrote it? Authored under a service account. But the machine signature maps to an IP on the 12th floor. Director Sales's corner. The heating system cracked like an old knee. Across the open office, screensaver snow drifted on idle monitors. He felt his anger organize itself, edges and planes instead of heat. "They staged it to look like prudence," he said. "Print fake emergency cards. Flag fake anomalies. Freeze real money. Watch who complains." Juno nodded, mouth a thin line. "They also passed the hold through the donor portal. We're going to get 'thank you for your patience' while we ensure integrity emails in the morning." Miguel opened the compliance ticketing system and started a new thread. He attached the vendor proof, the access logs, the script meta. He wrote like a surgeon stitching. Clean, no flourish. Subject: potential collusion, Velar plus internal, emergency fund hold 12 to 24. He tagged it red. He copied the board's audit committee chair, and then, with a breath that felt like a door closing, he copied Sales. His phone buzzed. A text from Rafa. 6 sites red, 14 families turned away since 5 p.m., 9 with valid overrides logged, addresses in thread. The numbers lived under his ribs. 9 valid overrides, 14 families. Each had a temperature, a pair of hands, a clock. "We're lifting the hold for families with children now," he said, already moving. "Push an instruction to all sites. Admit with manager's good faith judgment. We'll reconcile tomorrow." "That doesn't exist as a button," Juno said. "Then make one," he said. "We'll call it Warm Start." She blinked, then grinned, a quick glint in the blue light. Warm Start it is. Her fingers danced. The new flag appeared in the interface, a sun in winter. Sites will see it yellow. Clicking yes overrides red for 12 hours. "Send it," Miguel said. "Message from me. If anyone complains, route them to my voicemail." As Juno worked, he dug into camera logs. He pulled the 12th floor hallway at 3:30 p.m. The feed populated a river of grey. He scrubbed. At 2:52, the elevator doors opened. Director Sales stepped out with a man in a black wool coat and a woman in a camel wrap. The man carried a flat box printed with a logo he didn't need to zoom to recognize: Vila. The three entered Sales's office. At 3:19, the woman left alone, her phone to her ear. At 3:23, the man left with the empty flat box tucked under his arm. At 3:24, a cursor in the access logs recorded a cosign from Senior Ops Director. V. He froze the frame and stared. The camera gave him silhouettes only, but silhouettes tell truth, posture, momentum, the angle at which people approach doors. The man's coat flared with impatience. The director's hand made a patting gesture, a rehearsed reassurance. The shape of collusion is always banal. It never knows it's being watched by a lens that feels nothing. His inbox chimed, a reply from Sales. Miguel, let's be clear. The audit is standard. Villar raised legitimate questions. Your unilateral changes risk donor trust. I suggest you stand down until we meet. Miguel typed back in 5 sentences. Families with overrides were denied tonight. I have video of you meeting Vela at 3 p.m. and logs of a hold script from your floor at 3:21. I am invoking emergency authority per policy 7.1. Warm start is live for 12 hours. If you believe I'm misinformed, join me on a call now with compliance. He sent it, then dialed the Senior Ops Director, whose initials sat like a splinter in his day. The phone rang and rang. Voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. He texted, "We need to talk. Tonight." Juno looked up. Warm start is rolling. 2 sites already admitting. His shoulders loosened by a degree, a small hinge of ease, a thing that might hold until morning. He grabbed his coat. "I'm going out. I want eyes on a red site." "The one on Old Depot is close," Juno said. "It denied 3 families. "Meet me there in 20, he said, already moving. The city between office and Old Depot was a study in white noise. Plows groaned. A stray strand of tinsel rolled down the avenue like a dumb comet. He parked in front of a brick building with a mural of city birds on its side. Pigeons, starlings, a hawk looking like it knew something about patience. The shelter door bristled with taped notices. Inside, the lobby air was a stew of boiled coffee and wet wool. At the desk, a man in a knit cap and a woman with a badge conferred over a tablet. He flashed his ID, but kept it low. "We've pushed a warm start," he said. "You should see yellow." The woman tapped, blinked, exhaled. "There it is. Admit families with children." She looked up, relief primal and unpretty. "We sent people away," she said. "I told them to try downtown. Her voice broke, hands lifting and falling, an apology to physics. "Call the ones you have numbers for," Miguel said. "We'll cover rides." A little boy in a pirate beanie watched him from a bench, clutching a plastic dinosaur. The dinosaur looked like it could endure a lot. He crouched. "Good hat," he said. The boy pushed the dinosaur at him solemnly, as if offering an artifact for inspection. The ridges were worn smooth, where a hand had learned comfort by repetition. A woman near the radiator stood and approached, hesitant. "You said families with children," she asked. "We came at 7. They told us to—" She gestured to the door. An arrow pointed at the night. "Please," the receptionist said, already opening a gate. "Come in." Miguel stepped back and let the gravity shift, watched the lobby's tension redistribute into action. His phone buzzed. Juno. 2 more sites flipped. Also, IT confirmed Senior Ops Director's laptop accessed the art files at 2:43 p.m. via remote VPN. Source IP traces to home. A pin dropped on a map. An address in a neighborhood of executive porches and good porch lights. He stared at the pin until the lines on the screen turned abstract. Home. The initial V wasn't a random sigil in a footnote. It was someone's living room at 2:43 p.m., approving proofs while wrapping gifts, perhaps. He imagined a tree in the corner, tasteful, light steady, a screen glow on a face that had sat in his staff meetings all year, arguing for efficiency. Efficiency had a smell tonight. It smelled like radiator heat and snow steam and the faint iron of shame. He turned toward the door. "I'll be back," he told the receptionist. "You have my number." In the parking lot, Wynne tried to pry his coat open. He let it just for a second to feel how it was to be unarmored. Then he zipped it up, started the car, and tapped the address Juno sent into the navigation. The route traced a clean line through the city's frost. Halfway there, his phone lit with a new email from the board chair. Subject, pause. The body, "Miguel, I'm receiving messages from Director Salles about unilateral actions. While I appreciate your passion, the optics of overriding audit controls tonight are sensitive. I advise you to hold until morning. We can convene at 9. He pulled to the curb under a street lamp that hummed with insect ambition. He read the email again, feeling the shape of an old trap. Optics over outcomes. He typed back, then deleted. He needed one line that would be undeniable when read aloud tomorrow, one line that would make sense to anyone who had ever stood in a cold doorway. He wrote, "We denied 9 families with valid overrides on the coldest night of the year. I'm acting to correct that. I welcome review at 9. He sent it. He looked up. The city continued its quiet work. Snow on steps, light in windows, breath in air. His phone vibrated again, a text from an unknown number. "If you come here, come alone. V." The address below the text matched the pin on his map. At V's front door, would he find a scapegoat with a tidy script, or the architect of a scheme that went beyond an audit hold? Frost glazed the sidewalks into pale armor. Miguel parked 2 houses down from the pin on his map and cut the engine. The block was one of those practiced neighborhoods where porches knew their angles and wreaths matched from door to door. Light pulsed warm behind curtains. The street itself was a held breath. He stepped out, boots sighing into powder, and walked toward the only house with lights at the very back instead of the front, as if its conversation were happening off stage. The doorbell chimed a tasteful, expensive note. Footsteps, then a pause long enough to register as decision. The door opened half a span. In the slice of light stood the senior operations director. V, face composed, sweater immaculate, jaw set in an expression that would photograph as reasonable. The initial finally had a body. "Miguel," they said, voice pitched low for the block. "You came. You asked me to," he said. "Alone." The door widened. "Inside, then. It's cold." He stepped into a foyer of efficient good taste. A neutral rug, a bench with hidden storage, coats hung by size. To the left, a living room with a tree done in restrained whites and glass. Under it, 3 presents wrapped in burgundy paper. On the coffee table, a laptop glowed a winter blue rectangle. A candle smoldered in a jar labeled cedar and smoke. "You texted from your own phone," Miguel said, glancing once at the device on the table. "That saves me the trouble of coyness." V closed the door with a soft press, then leaned against it, hands in pockets, a posture that said they were used to managing doors, thresholds, who got to stand where. "You're angry," they said. "Try not to be theatrical." The word again, as if someone had handed out a script this afternoon. Miguel took a slow breath, let the scent of cedar mark the moment. At 2:43 p.m., your laptop accessed our art files via VPN. At 2:47, you approved a proof for emergency cards at Villar. At 3:24, you co-signed an audit hold that pushed valid disbursements into pending. At 6, a mother and 2 children were told no at a partner site. I'm trying to keep my math plain. V's eyes flicked toward the laptop, then back. Vela's backup print run exists for continuity. If a vendor slips, if our printer misses a truck, If a storm takes out a route, our printer delivered last week. Linen stock. Count matched. He kept his tone factual. Anger was a flare. Facts were a furnace. You didn't back up, you duplicated, and your audit froze real money on the coldest night of the year. They pushed off the door, moved into the living room with a measured pace, and gestured at a chair. He didn't sit. Miguel, they said, you and I have had this argument in different clothes all year. You want speed, I want control. You think friction is cruelty. I think friction is safety. Tonight proved me right. Explain the safety in a door staying shut on 2 children, he said. Explain the safety in money moving without question because a code exists, they shot back, voice sharpening. We've had vendors skim. We've had phantom requests. We've had partner sites cozy with suppliers. Velar flagged anomalies because there were anomalies. Velar printed our crest, he said. Velar sold a problem and then sold the solution, and you recognized the opportunity. They said it like they'd been waiting to be allowed to tell the truth. The room seemed to tilt. What opportunity? The opportunity to force visibility, V said. They spoke briskly, as if presenting to a board. Bullet points, confidence. When systems get comfortable, bad actors hide inside the speed. You know this. Your warm start is elegant, but it can be gamed by anyone with a supervisor who wants to look generous. We needed a choke point that made everyone lift their head. Tonight, every site that went red called someone. Every partner declared capacity out loud. Every manager showed their hand. Tomorrow morning, your dashboard will have more honest data than it had all quarter. Miguel stared. You staged a stress test on people, not servers, people. We staged a test on a system that had drifted, they replied. Real drift hurts real people every night, not just Christmas Eve. We chose a night when donors pay attention. The sentence hit like a steel edge. He thought of the board chair's email about optics. He thought of the director's silky reminder about rules. This wasn't about service, he said. This was about optics and leverage. V's expression didn't change. Every reform needs a story. And how do the children factor into your narrative? He asked, voice thinner than he wanted. As props? As proof, they said. You don't change budgets with spreadsheets, Miguel. You change them with scenes. You walk into a shelter with a red dashboard and 2 shivering children. You write warm start into policy in a night. Congratulations. You're better at this than anyone. He felt, briefly, the vacuum you feel when the other person explains your heroism back to you as a tactic. What did Salis get? He asked. V's mouth quirked, not a smile. Sals thinks he gets control of the narrative. Donor trust, audit prudence, adult in the room. He'll claim he held us to standards, that you acted rashly, that the board should rein you in. He'll ride the outrage to push his people into compliance roles he can stack. He's very good at looking like a break while laying track. And Velar? A nice renewal next quarter and a quiet expansion into advisory, V said. They promise to root out the anomalies they conjured. Everyone looks rigorous. The money flows where they can see it. So all of you, Velar, Sals, you get power, Miguel said. Meanwhile, 9 families tonight heard the word no as if it were weather. The candle cracked as a pocket of fragrance oil burned through. V glanced at it, brushed ash off the mantel with 2 fingers, as if the house itself disliked mess. 9 tonight, they said. Hundreds over quarters if we let drift continue. You can't keep playing rescue. You need structural wins. Structural wins don't require manufacturing harm, he said. Then explain Lena, they said, name landing with a precision designed to make him flinch. She had a card, a code, a partner site. She still almost slept outside. Your system, your promise, your crest. Our stress merely showed what was already true. A partner site felt safe ignoring an override because the dashboard was red. The rhetorical neatness was obscene. He felt his control return to his hands, finger by finger. "The dashboard was red because you wrote a script to freeze funds," he said. "Cause and effect isn't a loop just because you draw it in a circle." V's chin lifted, half challenge, half deflection. "I did what needed doing to get the board's attention." "No," he said quietly. "You did what needed doing to get the board's attention on you." They shrugged. "The concession you make when you're not afraid of the judge. Pick the pronoun you prefer. The outcome will be the same." On the coffee table, the laptop screen flashed an alert. Miguel stepped closer, ignoring the invitation to sit, and read the subject line as it bloomed. "Auto Q4 review. Task complete." The script had finished its cycle, pushing everything it could into pending. Behind the alert, a window showed camera thumbnails, familiar corridors, elevator doors yawning open, a timeline scrub bar. V didn't bother hiding it. "You're pulling building feeds from home," he said. "They're mine to pull," they said. "My team runs ops." "Your team runs ops," he repeated, letting the claim sit between them. He thought of the florist's awning and the man with the red ribbons. He thought of the vendor proof approved at 251 with a lazy initial. "Did you know Velar was printing physical cards with our crest?" "I approved the proofs," V said lightly. "And the denial note?" Miguel asked. He took the slip from his pocket and set it beside the candle. The ink had bled in the snow, but the letters were clear. "Hold until V confirms." For the first time, a hairline crack moved through their composure. It was almost affectionate the way they looked at the note, as you look at a thing you decided on when you still believed you were anonymous. "I didn't write that," they said, "but good soldiers know which initials carry weight." "Soldiers," Miguel echoed. "We run shelters. We are not at war with ourselves. We are at war with drift," they said. "And with the stories people tell themselves to sleep well, that the system mostly works, that a few exceptions prove it. You needed to feel how brittle it is." He stared at the tree, glass ornaments catching their reflections and returning them slightly distorted, prettier than truth. In another room, a heater clicked on, a fake hearth. He could hear faintly a neighbor's television broadcasting fake snow falling on prettier lives. The city kept two weathers, outside and inside. Both could be deadly if mistaken for the other. "Velar talked like you," Miguel said. "Choke points, instructive pain. Who called whom first?" V's smile thinned to administrative. "We called each other," they said. "Because we are adults who manage risk." He looked at the time. Juno's warm start would be lighting up screens across the network. Families would be stepping inside. For now, a dam held. He could spend another hour letting V pass ethics into efficiency, or he could move. He chose motion. "I'm suspending you," he said, voice level, the way he said, "admit them" an hour ago. "Effective now. Compliance and authorities will follow." They didn't blink. "Sales will have you for it," they said. "The board hates surprises." "I'll bring them presents," he said, nodding at the laptop. "Logs, proofs, video of you in this sweater approving prints while freezing funds." They laughed then, small and almost kind. "I serve at your pleasure," they said, formal words wrapped around a knife. "But before you cast me as villain, check the accounts you don't read at night. Look past Velar. Look at the feeder program that routes overflow to the same third-party hotels every cold snap. Ask who owns those hotels. Ask who signs their invoices. Follow the money that calls itself mercy." The room seemed to tilt again, but the angle was the same one he'd been walking since 7 p.m. Down a corridor where doors multiplied. He looked at the laptop and thought of the mural hawk's patience. "Names," he said. "Start with Sal's brother-in-law," they said. "Different surname, same dinner table. You'll find your missing rooms there, Miguel. Your unavailable cots, your red dashboards. I didn't build that. I just pulled the fire alarm." The truth arrived like heat, not visible at first, then everywhere at once. Lodged inside the scripted prudence was a pipeline that siphoned overflow into hotels tied by blood to the director. Deny families at shelters, route them off books, bill triple for emergencies, call it compassion. He took one step toward the door. "Send me your passwords and leave your badge on the table," he said. "You won't delete anything. You won't touch a thing. If you do, I will treat it as obstruction." They removed the lanyard calmly, set it beside the cedar candle. "Merry Christmas, Miguel," they said. "I hope your rule fits in a boardroom." He opened the door to the night. The cold was honest. He welcomed it like a slap that wakes you. He was halfway down the walkway when V called after him, voice stripped of varnish. "One more thing," they said. "Ask Lena where she got that card." He stopped. Snow hissed against the bare branches. They watched each other across the soft domestic distance of a walk, shoveled to perfect. "Because if you think Valar handed it to her," V said, "you're still missing the person who can make your clean story messy. Ask her who pressed the gift into her hand at 5:30. Ask what they called themselves. If the counterfeit card didn't come straight from Valar, but from a helper working the line outside the shelter, who, exactly, had placed it in Lena's hands? And how deep did that off-book pipeline run when Miguel started pulling names in the cold? The cold pressed the truth flat. It left only what could stand. Miguel drove straight from V's porch to the warming center, the heater whining like a tired violin. He needed Lena's memory, not a theory. Inside, the paper star window glowed. Cots breathed a soft chorus of new safety. He found Lena awake, elbows on knees, the sealed red-bowed box at her feet, like a promise she was still learning to believe. "I have to ask you something precise," he said, kneeling so his voice stayed inside the small weather of their corner. "Who gave you the card with the emergency code? Not where, who?" Lena searched the room, as if the answer were tacked to a wall. "A woman," she said, "red scarf. She said she was with City Outreach Partners. She stood near the line, not staff, not quite a volunteer. Clipboard, but no name tag. She moved fast." "What did she call herself?" Lena frowned. "She didn't. Someone behind me said, 'Ask her. She knows people.' She scanned the line, picked me, pressed the card in my hand, and said, 'This will make it easy. Show it. If they delay, tell them to call Valar Verification.'" Then she was gone. Lena's eyes sharpened. "She knew my girls' names without asking." A static walked up Miguel's arms. "How?" he asked. "She looked at a list," Lena said. "A printout with first names, ages, and the last 4 digits of a phone. I saw our names. The list had a blue bar on top and a logo, 2 V's intertwined." He nodded once, stood into decision. "Thank you. You're safe tonight. In the morning, I'll bring next steps. There's more help after the night." He stepped out to the lobby and called Juno. "Find me City Outreach Partners, Shell or alias. Check if it's a Valar DBA, and pull exterior camera footage at the center between 5 and 6. I want faces." "On it," Juno said. "Also, Warm Start flipped all 6 red sites. Staff are crying in my voicemail, the good kind. Good, keep it rolling. Draft a protocol for instant release, families with children. 1 button, 12-hour authorization. Manager accountability logs attached. We'll formalize tomorrow." He paced under the awning, snow pecking his cheeks like a wake-up. A rideshare idled. 2 toddlers shuffled past in matching boots. The city adjusted its weight. His phone buzzed. Juno again. "City Outreach Partners is a Valar brand," she said. "Registered last spring. Street engagement services. And I've got the exterior feed. I'm sending you stills." Images pooled on his screen. The line out front, the woman in the red scarf threading it, a clipboard. The moment a small wrapped box met Lena's hands, the glint of an embossed crest. Miguel pinched to zoom. The scarf woman's face stayed in shadow, but her posture, a forward lean, weight on the balls of her feet, broadcast a kind of engineered urgency. At the edge of frame, a man held the florist's door, half in, half out, a stack of red ribbons at his hip. The florist again. The universe liked a refrain. "Save everything," he told Juno. "I'm making calls." He rang compliance, voice distilled to bone. "Immediate. Suspend Director Sal's pending investigation. Lock his access now. Preserve devices. Issue hold notice to Senior Ops Director. Badge collect. VPN cut. I'll send evidence." There was a pause. The kind trained into lawyers to remind you they have better clocks. "On what grounds?" "Vendor collusion, override suppression, and routing overflow to hotels tied to the director's in-law," he said. "I have logs, video, and a vendor proof. The night is still happening. We act now." Keys clacked, the ceremonial rustle of authority clothing itself. "Understood," compliance said. "We're in." He hung up and dialed a city contact who owed him a favor for a summer grant written at midnight. "We need a snapshot of hotel invoices tied to emergency overflow in the last 2 cold snaps," he said. "Cross-reference owners with Sal's family. Quietly. Now." "Your cheer is infectious," the city contact deadpanned, but the keys began anyway. 30 minutes. 15, Miguel said, and cut the line. He walked to the front desk. 2 asks, he told the receptionist. "First, any numbers you collected from families turned away. Call them. Tell them to come back. We'll reimburse rides. Second, if anyone wearing red scarf or carrying a City Outreach Partners clipboard shows tonight, you route them to me." The receptionist nodded, eyes blazing with a simple human fury that makes systems move. "Gladly. Action first, repairs next." He ducked into the side office, borrowed a laptop, and wrote 3 documents at speed. The first, Emergency Release Protocol, Families with Children, Warm Start V1. 1 page, 1 switch, clear accountability, a 12-hour window that could be extended by site lead, plus 1 additional signature. The second, Vendor Freeze and Verification Gate. No vendor-initiated anomalies could trigger holds without triage by a 2-person inside team not tied to ops. The third, Transparency Panel, live. A simple web dashboard to publish real-time bed counts, disbursements, and warm start activations, stripped of personal data, full of sunlight. He sent them to Juno with a subject line that would land in a boardroom, integrity plus heat. Then he returned to Lena. 2 immediate steps, he said, gentle. "We have temporary housing for you starting tomorrow morning. Not a gym, a room with a door that locks. We'll arrange school intake for the girls after the holiday. A social worker will meet you here at 9. Also, do you have experience in administration?" Lena blinked, as if the word belonged to a previous life. "I worked front office at a clinic, scheduling, invoices, phones that never stop." "We need that spine," he said. "If you want, we'll interview you for operations support. Day shifts, steady, no pressure to answer now." He handed her a card, plain, no crest, just a name, a number. "Sleep first." Her eyes brightened with the odd, fragile hope that cracks open in rooms like these when the air warms just enough. She nodded. "Thank you." His phone trilled. Juno again. "Board chair," she said. "They saw your email. You have a 7 a.m. emergency session." Chair asked, "Are we exposed?" "We're transparent," he said. "By sunrise we'll have a live panel up. Nothing kills rumor like sunlight." "And Salis?" "Suspended," he said. "Compliance just pulled his badge. He's emailing donors, legals on it." Miguel pocketed the phone and stepped outside. The florist's window still framed a fidgety universe of ribbon and shadow. He crossed the street and knocked. The man from earlier appeared, eyes flicking to the red bow in Miguel's hand like a homing pigeon. "We're closed," the man said, voice trying for casual and landing on choir boy caught behind the chapel. He went to flip the sign. Miguel pressed 2 fingers to the glass, stopping the motion. "I'm not here for lilies," Miguel said. "I'm here for whoever supplies city outreach partners with red ribbon and borrowed legitimacy." He held up the card. The florist's pupils pinned. His hand twitched toward the back. "I don't." "Save it," Miguel said. "Open, or I call the fire department to check your rear exit. It's ajar." The man sagged into his decision and unlocked the door. The bell chimed, brittle. Inside, the air was warm and humid, a memory of spring smuggled into December. The counter held more ribbon than inventory required, every spool the same shade of red as the box at Lena's feet. Behind the counter, a door stood indeed a hair open. Cold seeped through its seam like a tell. "Back there?" Miguel asked. The florist swallowed. "Storage. We sublet the back to a small outreach org. Pop-up, you know. Seasonal. City outreach partners," Miguel said. The florist's silence confessed. Miguel pushed the door and stepped into an aisle of brown boxes. The scent changed from flowers to cardboard and printer ink. A folding table had been set up under a rattling fluorescent. On it, a heat gun, stacks of gloss-cover cards, a roll of double-sided tape, and a small thermal printer as busy as an ant. A plastic tub bristled with red ribbons pre-cut. A binder lay open to a page labeled Velar Verification, Hotline Script. He didn't touch anything. He let the room talk. In a side bin, receipts curled like shed skins, reimbursements for transport, invoices to overflow hotels, a manifest with line items that matched the names Juno had flagged earlier. He traced a finger above one, Harbour Grand, emergency family rate, X11. The owner's LLC name pinged the place in his brain where V's last words sat. The director's in-law, a pipeline disguised as compassion. Footsteps scuffed behind him. The florist hovered, contrite. "They said it was helping," he said, thin. "Smoother than the city. The ribbon made people calm." "Scams always borrow the surface of kindness," Miguel said. He snapped 2 photos. Gloss cards, hotline script, a box label, Velar Pren 1224. He texted them to Juno and compliance with the florist's address pinned, and then to his city contact. He kept his hands in his pockets, prints off, pulse steady. A phone buzzed on the folding table. Caller ID, Sales. The florist recoiled, as if the name could bite. The call went to mist. The phone buzzed again. New name, V. Miguel looked at the florist. "Answer on speaker," he said. "Say nothing. Just set it down." The florist obeyed with the quickness of regret. A voice filled the storage room, low, calm, professionally tired. "We're tightening. Close the pop-up by midnight. Move everything to the usual drop and tell the scarf team to stop handing cards. We've got noise on the line." "Usual drop," Miguel repeated under his breath. He gestured. "End the call." The florist tapped. The room fell back into its fluorescent hum. His city contact texted, "Invoices, confirm. Harbour Grand billed triple on overflow, last cold snap. Owner tied to Sales's brother-in-law. We're pushing this to the inspector's desk. Also, whoever is running your ribbon circus forgot to file for a vendor permit. That's my door in." "Good," Miguel typed. "Bring jackets and a warrant equivalent." The florist wrung his hands. "I only rent space. They paid cash. I didn't think." "Start thinking now," Miguel said, not unkind. "You'll give a statement. You'll keep this room exactly as it is. You'll lock your front and wait for a knock that isn't mine." He stepped back into the shop, the bell chiming again, a cheerful lie. Outside, the city had thinned to essential movements. Plow, patrol, the occasional sprint of someone late to mercy. He dialed Juno. "Spin up the transparency panel now," he said. "Top banner, warm start admits, 23. Families rehoused tonight, updating live. Under it, emergency disbursement holds lifted. Independent review in progress." "We don't hide, we narrate." "On it," Juno said. "Also, Lena's social worker slot is set for 9, and I put her on tomorrow's interview list. Ops assistant. She'll be good." He smiled into the wind. "She will. As he pocketed the phone, a figure detached from the shadow of the florist's side alley. A woman in a red scarf, clipboard under one arm, the other hand fishing for keys. She saw him and froze. In the pause, a car at the curb started silently, headlights off. The woman's eyes flicked to the car, then back to Miguel. Decision rippled through her shoulders. He stepped forward, slow, palms visible. "No one's arrested tonight," he said, "but this ends." She set the clipboard down, the small surrender of an exhausted soldier. Up close, her scarf smelled faintly of cheap perfume and office carpet. She was younger than he'd expected. Her badge, half tucked, showed a logo, two intertwined V's. "Who signs your checks?" he asked. Her chin lifted. "City Outreach Partners." "Which is Velar," he said, "which invoices Harbour Grand, which bills my donors for rooms that should have been beds inside shelters we fund." The woman's breath stuttered. "You think the shelter beds were there?" she asked, a tired laugh escaping. "You really think capacity was a number and not a deal? People like me make sure kids don't freeze while you all fight about optics." "You put a counterfeit card in a mother's hand and told her a door would open," he said. "Then you helped write the script that made that door a wall." Her face crumpled around the truth of the sentence. "We were told the freeze was temporary, that the hotline could push approvals." "By whom?" She hesitated. Snow gathered on the lashes of her suspicion. "You'll have records," she said finally. "Check the dispatch chats. Username Vigil. They coordinated." He filed it. Vigil. V again, but not a person. An alias. He glanced past her. The idling car's windows tinted their own refusal. In the reflection, for a heartbeat, he thought he saw a profile he knew. A practiced smoothness of jaw. The car pulled off before the thought could harden. His phone buzzed with a single-line text from an unknown number. "Careful, Miguel. Your panel will show more than beds. It will show how many hands were on the lever." He looked at the florist's back room, at the ribbon factory of counterfeit mercy, at the paper stars across the street, at the sealed, red-bowed box by Lena's cot. He exhaled, warmth fogging the air, brief and honest. The alias Vigil had orchestrated the choke point from both sides, inside ops and on the street. When Miguel lit up the transparency panel by dawn and pulled the dispatch chats, whose real name would Vigil resolve to, and how deep would the boardroom ties go when the phone started ringing at sunrise? Dawn pressed a pale thumbprint on the city. The plows curled the night's last ridges of snow toward the gutters, and rooftops exhaled steam like tired beasts. In the warming center, the paper star window shifted from lantern to mirror. Miguel stood in the lobby with a paper cup that promised coffee and delivered grit, watching the numbers climb on his phone as the transparency panel went live. Warm start admits 31, 34, 37. A clean banner ran across the top. Emergency holds lifted. Independent review in progress. Sunlight by pixels. He opened the dispatch chats compliance had just scraped. The alias Vigil threaded through them, short directives, timestamps precise to the minute, the tone of someone who trusted the shape of command. Delay intake at red sites, redirect to partner hotels, call verification hotline for code check. In one thread, the alias pasted a map pin, a florist's backroom annotated supply. In another, Vigil posted the hotel list Lena would eventually hear at a service desk if she'd gone that route. Harbour Grand, River's Edge, Lakefront City, names with soft water to hide hard math. "Trace it," Miguel told Juno over the phone, voice low as the room yawned into morning. "Who is Vigil in meat space?" "Working," she said. "We've peeled the mask off the chat handle. It tied to a city login, which ties to a personal Gmail used for two-factor." Her keyboard flew, a secular prayer. "Crossed with two corporate registry filings. Okay, here." A pause, then, "Vigil is Velar's managing partner, yes. But the kicker, the managing partner is also a silent owner of the hotel LLC that bills emergency overflow. Harbour Grand Group. The sentence carried heat the way brass holds the sun. Miguel blinked once at the sick elegance of it. Vendor flags, anomalies, vendor prints counterfeit emergency cards. Vendor's street arm redirects families to overflow hotels. Vendor's silent hotel LLC invoices at triple the holiday rate. A private pipeline disguised as compassion, looping back like a clever thief to shake his own hand. "Boardroom at 7, he said. "We go in clean." The board's glass conference room gathered winter light and multiplied it. Directors ringed the table in careful sweaters. The chair looked equal parts concerned and caffeinated. Director Salles sat with lawyerly posture, a knot of composed grievance at his tie. The senior ops director's seat sat empty, a neat rectangle of absence. Miguel began with pictures, not claims. The vendor proof with his crest and Velar's mark. The access logs with 3:21 p.m. Blinking red. The building cam still of sales, ushering Velar into his office. The florist's back room, its altar to counterfeit mercy. The hotline script binder, the dispatch chat where Vigil pinned a map to the florist's door. He spoke in a voice calibrated to carry exactly to the corners, facts like staples. Salles cleared his throat when the hotel invoices hit the screen, his hand flattening a non-existent wrinkle. "I did what prudence required," he said softly, as if to a child. "We cannot allow funds to move unreviewed. Our donors expect your in-laws' hotel invoice triple the emergency rate on nights you froze disbursements and sent families there," Miguel said, sliding the city registry across the table. "Velar's managing partner masked as Vigil in our outreach chats and owns the hotel LLC. Your office co-signed the hold 5 minutes after Velar printed our crest. That's not prudence, that's Profit Master's oversight." A hush, the kind that falls before a verdict. The chair fiddled with a capped pen. "Director Salles, step outside while the board confers," she said, voice clipped to the bone. Salles blinked once, the only break in his elegance, then stood with a lawyer's economy and left behind a scent like expensive soap and smoke. Miguel looked out at the ribbed horizon of the city. Voices rose, a flock of words in the next room. In 10 minutes the board returned, faces reset into decision. "The board votes to suspend Director Salles immediately, pending investigation," the chair said. "We are executing a litigation hold and alerting authorities. We also authorize your warm start protocol retroactively and moving forward, with oversight by compliance. Effective today, we establish the Extreme Weather Fund with additional partner capital and direct reporting to the Audit Committee. You will present a public plan by noon." Miguel nodded once, hands on the table to feel the room like a surface you could push against. "The plan is in draft," he said. "We'll ship it." The chair hesitated, then leaned in an inch. The distance people cross when they feel both politics and weather. "You'll take heat for moving unilaterally," she said softly, "but not as much as if you hadn't moved." "I don't mind heat," he said. "It melts ice." They called in the senior ops director next, security and compliance flanking the door like punctuation. V entered with posture and Cedar still clinging to the sweater. Miguel watched their eyes take a quick inventory of the room's oxygen. The chair delivered the suspension with the gentle violence of policy. V nodded once and placed their badge on the table like the last chess piece in a solved game. The boardroom air tasted briefly of spent fireworks. After, in the corridor, Juno caught him with her laptop open to the fledgling transparency panel. It was almost beautiful in its bare utility. A living counter of beds and meals and rides granted, time-stamped admissions, a map that blushed yellow wherever warm start glowed. Miguel's thumb reached for the screen like a man checking a pulse. "OPSQ is clean," Juno said. "No new holds possible without 2 signatures we don't control. Outreach hotline shut. Florist sealed with the city's tape. Your city contact texted, warrant equivalent served, the backroom's a museum. Make it a case study," Miguel said. "Teach it into oblivion." By 10, the press release moved like a warm front across feeds. No child out in the cold. The text was as unadorned as a rule should be. The company committed to the Extreme Weather Fund, to a 12-hour automatic release protocol for families with children, to a public dashboard updated hourly, to third-party audits with no vendor overlap. They named the problem without adjectives. Disbursement holds, weaponized by vendor collusion. They named the cure without perfume, sunlight and speed. Miguel took no podium. He visited sites instead, yellow turning to green on the map as doors swung for families who had been weather the night before. At Old Depot, the boy in the pirate beanie held up his dinosaur like an old friend. At Midtown, a woman texted from a bus and arrived to a cot, her fingers thawing into her phone like a flower unclosing. The twins at the First Center woke to a breakfast that smelled like toast and not like charity. Lena met him at the cot, with her hair pulled back, the posture of someone who had decided to hold herself upright even if the room leaned. "The social worker came," she said, "and the housing coordinator. We have a room with a door tonight." The girls asked if the lock clicks. Her mouth found a small, precise smile. "It does." "And school?" Miguel asked. "After the holiday," she said. "They're excited to meet a librarian. I didn't expect that to be a sentence I got to say." He laughed, the sound unfamiliar and necessary in his own throat. "I've learned librarians can disarm most storms." She held up the red-bowed box. It was still sealed, the ribbon neat despite the night's travel. "We'll open this at the hotel," she said. "When it feels like we can keep what's inside." "Hold off as long as you like," he said. He took the dangling tag and with a careful tear removed the crest. He slipped the seal into his pocket. "Some marks need to be retired," he added. "We'll reprint on linen stock this time, and we'll open the gift because you choose to, not because you have to." They stood in the hum of heater and ordinary morning. In the corner, the twins practiced whispering to see if whispers could be twins too. Outside, the city shook snow out of its joints. He began to say goodbye, and Lena stopped him with a hand on his sleeve, soft as a comma. "I remembered something," she said. "The scarf woman. She called herself Vigil when the man at the front asked who she was with, like she thought it would sound reassuring." Lena's eyes were clear now. "It sounded rehearsed." "Thank you," Miguel said. "You just put a name on a ghost." By noon, the panel ticked past 50 warm start admissions, then 60. A separate counter began. Contracts terminated. Velar. Yes. Law enforcement referrals filed. Hotel invoices under review 100%. He watched it the way you watch the weather, not as entertainment, but as mission. At 1, he stood in a small conference room with a glass wall that reflected the city's paler sky. Lena sat across from him with a resume printed in the condensed font of Practical People. Her experience was exactly what he needed. Calendars wrestled into obedience, phones answered through storms. Juno asked 2 questions, then smiled with her eyes like a person choosing a colleague they'll lean on when the floor tilts. "If you want the job," Miguel said, "it's yours. Operations support. We build guardrails and heaters. We listen more than we speak. Decent pay, boring benefits, honest work." Lena looked down at her hands as if a script had appeared there and she needed to decide whether to read it. "Yes," she said. It sounded like a step onto a floor that held. Evening came wearing kinder light. Snow surrendered to salt. In a small, city-run hotel that did not belong to anyone's brother-in-law, the twins sat on a bedspread with a geometric pattern that insisted life could be arranged. They finally opened the red-bowed box. Inside, thermal packs, 2 bright-knit hats, a prepaid card for meals, and a note in Miguel's handwriting that did not mention titles or logos, for tonight and the next ones. The girls pressed the hats onto each other's heads with ceremony. The heater clacked a pleasant heartbeat. Lena tucked the prepaid card into her wallet like a key. Miguel stood by the window looking at the city he'd thought he knew. He pulled the removed crest from his pocket. It was small, stiff, a piece of authority that had been borrowed by people who thought words like prudence could launder harm. He folded it once, then again, and placed it in his wallet, not as a badge, but as a warning. Logos don't keep people warm. Decisions do. His phone buzzed with a final update from Juno. Extreme Weather Fund live with 3 anchor partners. First wire received. Warm start policy formalized across all sites. Panel refreshes every hour. A second message arrived from compliance. Criminal referrals accepted. City AG opening inquiry. And a third from the board chair. Shorter, heavier. We'll rewrite policy with you. And we'll try to deserve your rule. On the sidewalk outside, a string of red bows snapped softly in the wind, tethered but moving. He thought of rules, old and new, brittle and kind. He pressed his palm to the glass, greeting the cold like an honest adversary. Later, on his walk back to the car, he passed the church where the bells had tolled the hour the night before. A choir practiced inside, not sounding like angels so much as people who had decided to harmonize as best they could. That felt right. He paused under the lamppost with the red bows and looked up. Snow fell like the city's handwriting, tidier now, legible. He texted Juno. New policy title you'll hate, but that sticks. No child out in the cold. Juno replied, Fine. I'll make the sticker. Linen stock. No gloss, he wrote. No gloss ever again. He reached into his wallet and found the crest. He slid it behind his driver's license, not to flash at gates, but to scrape against his fingers when he reached for convenience. A small, useful pain. In the hotel room, Lena turned off the lamp and watched the twins' faces relax into the kind of sleep reserved for rooms with locks. She touched the red ribbon, now curled in a drawer like a tame snake, and let her chest open into something like rest. In the morning, she would go to an office where heaters and ethics were both checked daily. The door would require a badge. It would click. The city finally had the right kind of choke point, one that slowed harm and accelerated care. Outside, the wind ran out of edge. Inside, the evening held. And in the space between systems and weather, a rule landed and stuck, not because it sounded noble, but because it had been tested against a night when the air had teeth. No child out in the cold.